My name is Jeff Burrow, and if you are a client, I'm sure I look a little more familiar than those of you who have not met me. But I'm a financial planner, and I'll give you a little more of an introduction here in a few minutes. But today's topic, today's webinar, is going to be about what's going on with the economy, and I'm going to field some of the most commonly asked questions that I get. And these questions have come up before, generally speaking, when the markets and in the stock world and just the overall economic environment become a little volatile. People ask questions like, should I change how I'm investing? Should I sell and get out? What if I'm looking to retire in a few years, but I don't know if I can now because it looks like, I'm getting my statements in front of me and it looks like I have a lot less than I thought compared to the end of the year. These are concerns that everybody has. I even have younger folks that might have 20 or more years to retire, and they're asking, should I change, how I'm investing? So today I'm going to remind you of some things you probably already know, and that's some basic historical relevance of what we've been through before and how we went through it and how we can get through it again. Much of investment and financial success has a lot to do with your discipline, right? How you think of things and how you make decisions, and not your access to information or your access to, supposedly magical investments, which will always do well. I guess it's probably an easy reminder and hopefully not a sore subject for too many of you in the audience, but one of these so-called magical investments known as cryptocurrency, I cannot believe how many people have asked me about that in the last couple of years. And very rarely do people ask, well, Jeff, do you invest in it? And when they do, and I say no, it seems like the most convincing thing possible that, oh, well, if you don't, then maybe I shouldn't. I got to tell you, it's not that I don't know what it's going to do. It's just that if it's too new and it's only about making money and speculation, it's not really an investment. But that remains to be seen. There's a lot in crypto that can be good, but today's discussion is going to be about more mainstream investments, mainstream economical questions, and some of the things we all want. And that's financial independence in life. How can we get there even with this type of economy? So I'm going to share my screen, and let's get going here. Okay, we have plenty of screens to share. Hopefully you guys can see this. If somebody could in the chat box let me know that they can see the screen okay, I'm going to push the big button so we can get going. Wait for confirmation from somebody, hopefully, that they can see the screen here. All right. So what are we going to discuss specifically? I'll give you a quick introduction to myself and Sierra Ocean. We're going to talk about where we are, the investment markets. If you're going to be going to a place you've never been, like a big shopping center, and you're trying to figure out where you need to go, the first thing you need to know is, where am I now, right? The "you are here" bright dot on the map is what I'm going to bring you up to speed on. We're going to then talk about some common strategies to help you remain calm in volatile times. It's the classic when you're absolutely not calm and somebody says, just calm down, it makes you even more anxious, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there are ways you can remain calm. You can almost trick yourself into remaining calm. So I will remind you of some of the things that are important to remember when you feel like absolutely pulling your hair out. Ways to invest when things seem uncertain. By the way, some of these strategies, again, they're not magical at all. It's more of the fundamentals, but I'm going to tell you about 3 different ideas that you may not be using right now. And if you're not, you may want to consider it. Okay. And then questions and answers. And by the way, one of the things that is important to remember is that nothing we're talking about here today is going to be specifically catered towards your investment advice, because I'm not talking to you as a person. I'm talking to everybody as a group. So this is education. And if anything is discussed that seems like I'm specifically telling you to do something, disclaimer, I'm not. When we have an individual private conversation, or if you are a client, then I can give you a more specific piece of investment advice, but today is for education. So who am I? Well, here I am. Look at me. That is the CFP AIF version of myself, certified financial planner and accredited investment fiduciary. That's the alphabet soup that a lot of people are in our business, what they call that. But I'm proud of it. Been in the business for, I think it's my 23rd year. So right out of college. And CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner, which is a very difficult accreditation credential level of education to achieve. And then AIF means that I'm a fiduciary. So again, I don't sell products. I don't sell, commissionable, products that are about making me money. I consult with you to hopefully make you money. That's the idea. And as a fiduciary, I've got to do what's in your best interest. So those are some of the things about me. My company, Sierra Ocean, I have had the experience in working with and on Wall Street for Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. I've also had independent firms, and I am very proud and happy to be independent. And so this is my company. Most of my clients are between the Sierra Nevada and the Pacific Ocean. So there you go, Sierra Ocean Custom Wealth. So why are we here? Well, it might be because you are feeling like your dollars are just absolutely burning up. They're being consumed by the stock market or inflation. You don't feel at rest. It's not a good feeling. We've had a lot of good years in the past 10 to 12. Things have done pretty well for the most part. A few hiccups here and there. But right now, it just doesn't seem like there's much good news at all. So I presume that's why you're here, because we all have to sort of do this thing, right? We got to walk the tightrope of the life of finances. How much do I need to save to retire? How do I need to invest my money? What's an average amount to spend on for housing if I make X amount of money, right? These are all questions we wonder about. And we also grew up in a culture and still live in one where talking about money publicly can be a little bit awkward, or it might make you feel shy. And I get it. You don't want everybody to know your business, but this feeling that you kind of have to walk the tightrope and do everything perfectly, it's very common. But again, financial planning success and navigating tough economies is much more about discipline. It's not about being a genius. It's not even about making a lot of money. I've got plenty of people that I know that have a very high income. And sometimes they have something to show for it, but oftentimes they don't. Becoming a client of mine, and one of the first things I do is find out how we can turn whatever income you have into, long-lasting financial security, right? But you don't have to make $1 million a year to actually become well off. You can make much less than that. So this tightrope is tough, and you're going to go through some ups and downs. But I presume that's why you're here. But check this out. Number one risk people face is not losing their money in an investment, right? It's not taking the stock market to zero. It's not, that ride is never going to occur. The stock market cannot go to zero. Technically, if it went to zero, you wouldn't need money. As I always tell people, if it's going to go to zero, you need bullets and cigarettes, right? That's the currency you're going to need, because it's going to be doomsday out there. So you shouldn't worry about or even be convinced that we're going to have some cataclysmic event occur in the financial world. Bad things can happen, and they have. And in a little bit, I'll show you how we've gotten through those past events. But guys, this is the number one risk you face. It's running out of money before you run out of life. Now, nobody wants that. But I got to tell you, if you think you're going to live just a few more years and you are in your 70s, well, maybe. I don't know. You don't know. And nobody really knows the last day that they're going to be on this planet. But if you plan on living for at least, if you're in your mid 60s, according to this study and what most researchers are saying, another 20 to 30 years, that would be reasonable. So a happily married couple in their mid 60s is probably going to have at least one person, 89% likelihood of living to age 85. Now, if that's you, well, I hope you're financially prepared. And if you're well before the time of retirement, well, you might want to consider living past age 85, because with modern medicine, we can all live much longer, whether you want to or not, right? So that's your biggest risk. So how do we get through these things? Well, let's figure out where we are, because again, setting the scene here, the stock market, and it's June 29th, 2022. The stock market so far year to date hasn't been all that hot, but I can only show you the numbers as they've been shored up to the previous month. So this is as of May 31st, 2022. Spoiler alert, things haven't been that great in June. So if we had this in a few weeks, the chart I would show you is actually going to be a lot worse. So here we are in the month of June, I'm sorry, by the end of May here, with the stock market in the US, S&P 500 down 13, European stock market down 10. This is the UK market. It's kind of a esoteric thing to bring up and talk about why it's up, but it's up a little bit. Japan's down. Asian countries outside of Japan are down. Emerging markets are down. So in other years, we've always been able to count on the bond market. Well, if you don't want stocks, you can go to this more conservative thing called bonds. Well, in doing that, you end up having, unfortunately, losses as well this year. So no matter where you put your money, the mainstream asset classes are down. If you happen to put all of your money into oil January 1st of this year, congratulations, you're a genius. I wish you would have called me. You could have told me that it was going to go up. But guess what? You didn't know that. If anybody made that money bet, well, congratulations, you won this time. But remember, this is also because it's recovering from what it did the previous year or two. And it's also because of the Eastern European war. We've got supply chain issues with energy and stuff going on here politically in the US. So again, agricultural commodities, wheat, everything else up. These also aren't typical places you invest your money. So it looks very fancy and nice to see these up, but rarely do people run to them and succeed, because usually when they're up, that's the worst time to buy them, right? So it's a very odd economic time right now. Now, having to know about how the economy works is not anything you have to do, right? The time you learned about this particular chart in the classroom, whether it was high school or college, or maybe you never remember seeing this, all this is just a normal economic cycle. And by the way, cycles in life are all we know. There's a cycle every day, the circadian rhythm. You go to sleep, you get up, right? The sun goes around. Your health, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not that great. Relationships, sometimes relationships are fantastic and sometimes they're not, right? So if you realize that cycles are normal, then why wouldn't the market going down these last 6 months be normal? In a way, it kind of is. The question is, oh boy, what do we do about it and how far can it go down? Nobody knows. And if you came here for that answer, nobody has that answer. I just know that it's normal to go up and then it's normal to go down. During these times of peaks and then troughs, staying the course often is the right thing to do. The question is, why are we on what seems to be a steeper decline? Part of it's just because of our mind always makes us believe that, there's a threat around the corner, and that, we sort of trick ourselves into thinking more about what we need to worry about, even though there may be nothing to worry about. It's more of a psychological thing, but there is a real thing that's happened. And that's that the government has stimulated our economy in a way that has been, I think, maybe very, I'll just say too much for too long. By the way, this discussion should not be too deep into the weeds on how the economy works, but the government / the Federal Reserve, there's things that happen where they can literally alter and manipulate. The word manipulate kind of has a negative connotation, but they can change things like interest rates in the economy. They can change how much cash is available in the economy. And they can do simple things like hand money to banks in 2008 through the TARP plan. That money was then put into various lending facilities, and it made its way through to help bolster up the bad things that were happening in the great financial crisis for 2007 and 9. But then we've also had other stimulus for multiple reasons. And most recently, the PPP loans and the things that happened with the checks being sent out for everybody during COVID. I'm not suggesting, and this isn't a political conversation, that should not have happened, but it did. So all that extra money has to go somewhere. And it frankly causes things to heat up. And if they heat up and they go up, well, what should you expect? Well, you should expect for those asset classes to get larger, whether it's stocks or real estate, or even something that isn't well known, but there's a lot of stimulus when asset classes are invented. Cryptocurrency, NFTs, all these things, right, that are just on the edges of reality. You can have your belief about what they're going to do and what they're not, but again, when you have a lot of stimulus, it's easy to create new ideas about what is easy, easy money, easy come, easy go sometimes. So what's the trigger point? What happens? We've got a lot of things going on in this world, right? We have, of course, the Eastern European, Ukraine, Russia war. We've got a lot of battles with China, politically, economically. Just a lot of things going on here in the US. That causes the point of upward trajectory potentially to kind of peter out, start going down. Maybe that's what's happening. Again, I won't know and nobody else will know until we transpire through a few months and look back and go, that's when it happened. So maybe it's now, maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it started 6 months ago. Are we in a recession? Who knows? But this is the concern. Everybody thinks that it's going to pop. And what are we going to do? What's going to happen? So I have to remind you that remaining calm in these times is what we have to do, because I can't know, and neither can you, how well we're going to get through things. And the biggest problem we really have is the fact that we're just high class animals. We're primates, right? We're cavemen. Thousands of years ago, the brains of our ancestors allowed for us to navigate, the territory they were in, to make sure that they were safe and they were secure and that they weren't being threatened by risks like, neighboring tribes or famine, things like that, right? But the caveman in us is still there. That brain is on alert at all times. And by looking at a lot of the red arrows on your stock portfolio page, or by simply just thinking and ruminating on everything that could go wrong, it's extremely common for that to occur. Everybody sort of has an inclination to want to go do that, right? The doom scrolling, if I'm talking about modern social media times. But why do we do this? Well, because we're sort of addicted to it. We feel that as the caveman in us is too calm and relaxed, that's exactly when somebody's going to pounce on us and hit us in the head with a gigantic rock, right? That's exactly when we're going to be weak and vulnerable. We have to be on alert. So yeah, Jeff, the reason I've called 4 times in the last week is because I want to ask you again, what is it you think I need to do with my money? Right? So we are simply high-class primates. So I'm about to show you a chart. This is a simple bar chart, but before I press the button to reveal the picture, I really want for you to realize something, and that's that an ideal situation is what I'm going to tell you about. And I'm going to blow your mind with why you need to try to be, ideal. You need to try your best to do something here, and that's stay the course. This shows how much you would have made if you invested $10,000 20 years ago, technically January 1st, 2002. And if you did, and you stayed fully invested for that whole time, you would have made about a 9.5% return. You would have had about $61,000 in total. So your 10,000 would have turned into 61 grand. All right, congratulations. You did pretty good. In fact, you did very good. And the thing that this chart doesn't tell you is the path you took to get there, right? The amount of times you had to get some Pepto-Bismol, in the middle of the day because of the craziness that you went through. It doesn't talk about the times you were tempted to get out of the stock market to go chase something like, again, cryptocurrencies or something that appeared to be making more money at the time. So if you stay the course, you're a hero. It's hard to do. Everybody's convinced that, well, maybe I shouldn't be in there 100% of the time. I mean, every once in a while, shouldn't we just kind of sell, sit on the sidelines and wait until it so-called, gets better, quote unquote. The problem with that is no one knows when it's better until much later, right? There's no bell that's rung that's going to tell you precisely when to get in and out of the market. And this is crazy, but it's true. And that's that if you think you know when to get out of the market and when to get back in, but you're wrong just on 10 days out of thousands of days from the 20-year period we're looking at, if you just missed the 10 best days, you only would have made 5.33%. And that's because when the market gets really down and terrible and just day after day of losses, there's always an opportunity to make money because it's going to pop up very quickly and sort of have a relief here and there. So you missed 20 of those best days. Now you're not even talking about inflation. You're talking about losing money by taking the risk of the stock market. So when somebody says it's risky to invest in the stock market, well, a lot of ways it's risky to not invest in the stock market, right? Have a reasonable plan to stay the course. But this is sort of proving the point that if you are wrong just a few times, you're not going to get what you need in terms of a return. And again, your financial security could be compromised. So staying the course, oftentimes the best thing to do. All right, so now you've heard me say it and you're thinking, okay, Captain Obvious over here wants me to stay the course and invest and not get out. Well, that's easier said than done. Well, Captain Obvious here is going to agree with you. It is easier said than done. But let's just remind ourselves that the stories we tell ourselves, one of my favorite, I don't know if she's a psychologist, I think she's a psychologist. She's an author, Brené Brown. I love it. She says the story you tell yourself is what you're going to believe. But the fact of the matter is what we tell ourselves is just a story, right? If you tell yourself the world is ending, you will behave accordingly. If you tell yourself the world's going to be fine, you'll behave accordingly, right? So the emotions that you have are going to rule your thoughts. So maybe give yourself better, I should say your thoughts are going to rule your emotions. So you need to give yourself better thoughts. Tell yourself the right thing. Try to get on the side of logic as best you can. I can tell you this chart is absolutely true. So this has no numbers on it. You'll notice that the chart looks pretty similar to the stock chart. And that's because over time, the cycle of investing, it's pretty easy at the bottom because a lot of the times you get the up, right? You suffered through the down times and you're just completely given up, and then things start to get better and you have some encouragement, right? Then you feel confident. Okay, hey, things are better, right? This economy's turning around. I think we're going to be just fine. And then you start to make a little bit of money and you go, ha, ha. Let me tell you something. Maybe instead of the Honda Accord, I might spring a little bit and get the upper end model. You know what I mean? So I think at the top is what we call the euphoric part, when you know nothing can go wrong. You're convinced that everything always goes up and you can't possibly lose. That's the very top. And it's also when people tend to have the most confidence to buy, because when you make decisions based on your emotions, that is when your emotions are going to make you feel the best. It's not when it starts to go down and you kind of look at last month's price and you go, well, it was kind of, the price last month was a little high, but maybe it's better now. I'll just wait. I'll wait to see if maybe I should get out because it's kind of going lower. And then you're down here, you start to get a little worried, right? Finally, at the bottom, you get this panic stricken, this feeling that, oh, I got to get out. I have to get out. If I don't get out, I'll be the last one in. I don't want to be that stupid person, right? You tell yourself that. But that's also, I'll tell you when my phone rings the most, right here. And it's when people say, hey, do you think now's a good time to get into the market? Well, it's always a good time to get into the market if you have a long enough time horizon, but very rarely do people want to get in here. That's usually when most people want to do the opposite, and that's sell. So I'll tell you what I do is I use this as a barometer. When more and more people are calling me to get out and I'm having a harder, tough time to convince them to stay in, typically that's when I take cash that I might have on the sidelines and I put it to work. No, it doesn't feel good. It's absolutely emotionally a terrible feeling, but it's the right thing to do. And it's a logical thing to do. So, hey, if Warren Buffett can do it, anybody can do it. Hey, speaking of Warren Buffett, here's a smart guy. He's in his late 80s. He's a multi-billionaire and he's been around for a long time. He has shown his success through so many difficult times in our economy. And he's often asked, what's your secret to your success? Is it how smart you are? Is it the access to information that you have? Why are you so smart, Mr. Buffett? And he always says, look, you don't have to be smarter than the rest. You just have to be more disciplined than the rest. Literally, I think about this all the time when I'm looking to kind of convince myself of something that I don't know to be true, but I feel a certain way. Got to go back to the discipline, folks. This is a tough time. We got to stick to the plan. Okay. Actually, let me hold on before I show you that again. Again, another chart. But if this isn't starting to convince you that no matter how bad things can get, things can be okay afterward, that this too shall pass, as they say. This is a chart that shows 50 years from 1970. Yes, for those of you that haven't been doing math recently, 1970 was 52 years ago. Wow, right? But 50 years of consumer sentiment measuring. So in other words, hey, how's the average Joe feel about what's going on with the economy? 50 years of this. So this middle line right here is the average. On average, so forget what this quantifies, but just say this is how happy people are in general about the economy. On average, it's about 85.6. And on average, it's going to go up and it's going to go down, up and down. This doesn't look unsimilar to a stock market chart in some ways, except for one thing. There's no upward slope. It's just straight horizontal, left to right. And that's because every good time will eventually turn to a bad time. Isn't that true? And, these are some of the most spiritual leaders or the most well-known spiritual leaders on the planet have said as much. Good times will turn to bad times will turn to good times. But guys, look at this. The average return 12 months after these troughs have been pretty good. When we hit a point right here in February of 1975, the average return over the next 12 months, or the actual return, I should say, was 22.2%. From May 1980 to May 1981, it went up 20%. October 1990 and October 1991, it went up 29%. So what's this telling you? It's telling you that on average, the 8 very bottom parts of our how we feel about the economy over the last 50 years, the average return 12 months after that for the S&P 500 was about 25%. Oh, where are we now? Look over here. By the way, this is May. This isn't June. This chart is May, but it is June. So therefore, I know that people today, just by virtue of talking to people every day about this, I know people today feel worse than they did a month ago about the economy. So whenever the numbers come out for June, I'm pretty sure it's going to be lower. But the point is this: I don't know what's going to happen over the next 12 months. But as Mark Twain said, history may not repeat itself, but it probably will rhyme. And if it doesn't rhyme, just wait longer. What do I mean by saying that? I mean, you can give me all kinds of reasons to tell me that it's time to get out of the stock market and that this time it's different. But every single one of these times in the past, this shows a longer time horizon or longer historical horizon of what we're looking at. Like 50 years ago may not be enough for some of you. You might say, but what happened to the Great Depression? Well, here you go, 100 years of history. Your $1,000 would have turned into 14 million. I know not all of you have that sort of prescience to put. That would be a lot of money, by the way, in 1925. And you'd have to live a long time to achieve that. So that's not really what I'm getting at. But the point is, this $1,000 turned into a lot of different values through time. And it lived through the same things that many of our ancestors, if not we lived through, depending on how old you are: the Great Depression, the World War II, Korean War, the Black Monday, 1987, the Gulf War. I mean, that was, I think, the first most televised war that, people saw every day, and it caused the stock market to get a little bit topsy-turvy. The tech market burst. I'll tell you what's not on here, because it all sort of happened in the same time frame as September 11th. I mean, that was an unprecedented time. Okay. Global financial crisis, COVID. Here we are, right? We get through them. We'll get through them again. This too, it shall pass. So last thing on this before we start getting into more practical ideas, and that's timing. Okay. When you come to me and you say, I'd like some investment advice, well, one of the first things I'm going to ask you is, what are your goals? And then I'm going to say, okay, well, if you'd like to retire, when would you like that to be? Right? Because if you have more than 10 years, then we consider that a pretty long time frame. 5 years? Okay. Not as long, but longer than 1 year. But if you said, what's going to happen to the stock market tomorrow? That's a little more dicey. Well, I can tell you that if you look at a very long history, here we are. This is 90 years of history now, that on average, if you invest for a month, 62.9, or let's just round up, guys, about 2 out of every 3 months over the last 90 years, you actually would have made money. And about 3 out of every 4 years, you would have made money if you invested for 1 year. Right. So look at the 5 years. The longer you invest, the higher the probability that you're going to make a positive return. Now, I will say that 95% of the time, if you've invested for 10 years, you would not have made money. So I will say this to you. If none of this has convinced you, you're still feeling a little negative about things, I will ask you, what if today is the beginning of a 10-year period that you're not going to make money? And you absolutely knew that. What would you change about your investing? And you might say, I'd get out. And I would say, and then what? Because if you get out because you think we're going to have one of these 10-year periods, you still have to do something with your money. And if you sit it in the sidelines, you put it under your mattress, even if you put it in the bank, inflation's still going to eat up that actual money in terms of purchasing power. A very nerdy financial planner thing to remind you of, but it's the truth, right? So even if you think this could be the next 10 years, you still should do something with your money and not just do nothing. Okay, something, so many paths. What do we do? How do we get there? Well, if you're a client, some of this might seem familiar. If you're not a client, this may be something you want to consider in your own portfolio. And that's what we call winning by losing less. So again, before I show you this chart, guys, there is no magic. I cannot possibly know that the market's going to go down tomorrow and get you out and then know exactly when to get you back in. No one can do that. What we can do is we can soften the blow. So if we assume things are going to be a little bit negative, what can we do in the portfolio? What can we do in your investment choices to potentially make things a little better? Well, how about you lose less? I always say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you're probably not going to give me a trophy for this, but you've lost less than everybody else. Dun, da, da, congratulations, right? Well, actually, it's kind of hopefully what they're hiring me for. And that's not to always make more money than they could do by themselves. Hopefully a professional could, but more specifically, keeping them on path so that when times get very rough, they might just lose less, but then they've got a head start when things turn around again. If we can do that, that's great. And this is why it's really important. It's not the psychological aspect of it. There's an actual mathematical component that losing less helps you with. And it's this: if you lose money in your portfolio, you have to make more as a percentage to get even than what you lost. So I'll say it another way. If you lose 50%, you can't just make 50% to get back up to even. If you lose 50%, you have to make 100% to get back up to even, right? 100,000 turns into 50,000. Your 50% loss is not cured by making 50% again, right? Because you'd only be at 75,000. You got to make 100. So it happens with smaller numbers too. If you're down 5%, you have to make 5.3 to get back up to even. If you lose 10, you got to make 11. So that principle holds true all the way across. Guys, this is math. So if you lose less, you've got a head start, but also you don't have to work as hard, right? Your portfolio, your money doesn't have to work as hard to get back up. Okay. Jeff, you've told me a lot of things. You've told me numbers. You've told me what appears to be some motivational facts. You can give me some quotes by some pretty old rich guys. But what you haven't done so far is you've told me what to do. Can you just tell me what to do? Can you please give me the precise instructions on what to do? I can hear you. And no, I can't. What I can do is give you some education. And then you can decide either for yourself or work with your advisor, or if I am your advisor, maybe we're already doing this. But guys, risk to reward. We know there's various ways to invest. But of all these choices, are you supposed to put it all in green? Okay, this shows you from 2007, which is right before the financial crisis, to today, what asset classes, what performance they've done each and every year, right? So emerging markets, commodities, developed markets like the US, okay, bonds, fixed income. Okay, do you see any patterns here? The answer is no, there's no pattern. And so you can't use things like patterns to give you long-term success. Sometimes in the short term, there's patterns, momentum and whatnot, but really, if there's such a thing as a more high, smooth, probable portfolio, okay, that's going to give you hopefully what you need, it's the middle ground. It's this idea that this asset allocation path gives you a little bit of everything. And a little bit of everything is oftentimes better than having 100% of one thing, right? So diversification doesn't make you more money. It just loses you less. Is that a motivational speech? Jeff, you're telling me to lose less and that's how you win? Yes. Because if you let the rest take care of itself during down times, losing less allows for you to get to the other side of the canyon, right? If you say, I am diversified, Jeff, look at my portfolio. I'm going to say, you got a lot of apples. I don't care what color they are. You got a lot of apples. Oh, okay. So really what you mean, Jeff, is that I should have apples and oranges and maybe some other citrus fruit, maybe that pear looking thing and an avocado. Yeah, that's better, right? You're sort of in that fruit basket and with different colors. Yeah, that's better than just apples that are the same color and even better than apples of different colors. But this is kind of what I mean, guys. You should have a little bit of things that are going to give you a lot of variety so that when the time is tough, not everything's doing the same thing. And at the beginning of the webinar, the presentation, I said, look how crazy it is that both stocks and bonds are down considerably this year. That's very, very rare. But if that's all you own, well, you're down. And yes, almost everybody is down this year, as you should be, because that's pretty normal. Having said that, maybe 10, 20, 30% of your portfolio should be something other than those things. So what are some of those things? Well, you probably can guess by all the words on the screen that I have to do this. My attorneys made me do it. But I want you to know that nothing that's going to be discussed herein is investment advice, and it's educational and generic. But everything I talk about potentially could help you and it potentially could hurt you. But I want you to make your own choices. If you're using your own financial advisor, talk to your financial advisor. But by all means, buyer beware, as they say. Okay. All right. First things first, real estate and real assets. I will discuss those. You're going to say, yes, of course you need to own real estate. That's why you own a home. I mean, beyond your own home, right? And you can do it even if you don't want to buy a single family rental and be a landlord. There's other ways you can do it. So we'll talk about that. Private credit, alternative lending. This is a unique thing. It's an asset class that's been around in an institutionalized way for the broad public markets, maybe 20 years. For the last 10 years, it's really taken off for reasons I'll explain in a moment. And then finally, this last one here, hedged equity or hedging your existing positions. little more advanced. But again, it depends on how you invest. If you have a very concentrated position, if you have a lot of money in one sector, in one area, this is the type of thing that you may want to look into. All right, real estate, real assets. These are the bread and butter of America, right? This is where wealth is made for so many people. In fact, if you combine the stock market, the cryptocurrency market, the precious metals market, you combine all of those together and you get the combined value, real estate still wins by a huge margin. Everything you see is owned by somebody, right? Every house, every building that you shop in, that you work in. Think about the magic of some of the pieces of real estate that you drive by every day, warehouses that have in them products that when you push a button on a computer can be delivered to your doorstep in less than 2 days, right? There's not a big, gigantic, 6 million square foot warehouse in podunk nowhere that has every item you want. There's many relatively medium to large size warehouses all over the US that have those things that you want in them, right? That's how real estate works. So what kind of examples? Multifamily apartment buildings. This is shopping centers, supply chain warehouses. That's what I was just mentioning. Farmland. My goodness, many of you are from the Central Valley of California. If you've not thought of farmland as an investment, you haven't thought about the rows of crops you drive by every single day, right? Somebody owns that. Somebody's making money with that. And sometimes people lose money with that. But in the long run, farmland, timberland, all these things have had very good track records. So why? Well, because real assets provide an opportunity to make money by the appreciation of the property and value, right? Again, over time, but also there's an opportunity to create an income stream. The people leasing the property from you are going to pay you. So if you own a house, you can become the landlord. But in the professional investing world, we don't tell people all the time to go buy individual properties because that's a more advanced way to do it. You can own a fractional share of a lot of real estate completely passively and not worry as much about being a landlord. All right. Why is it good for other reasons other than maybe you could make money? Well, it has done well through inflationary environments. This is one of these asset classes where there's only so much of it. And yes, they're building more, but you can't just do it in one day. There's quite a ramp up, and the cost actually is a big prohibition to doing it easily for sure. But an inflationary hedge is something we're looking for today. And investment returns on these have historically been in line with what the stock market's given. So pretty good. But the thing is, they don't always happen in the same path or in the same fashion. They're what's known as uncorrelated returns. So you add these things to your portfolio, right? To your amount of investment, no matter if it's $1,000 or $1 million or more dollars. Adding this type of asset class can help you in difficult, volatile environments. Now you might ask, yeah, but Jeff, if the economy is going to get bad, why would I want to buy real estate? I might lose money. Yes, but for all the same reasons I was trying to convince you earlier, that the stock market has ups and the stock market has downs, so does the real estate market. But no one knows, me, you, nobody, about what's going to happen literally tomorrow. So look at that long-term horizon, right? That view of 5 years out, 10 years out. You got to look into the future because that's when you're going to need the money. You don't need it tomorrow, right? You don't need it in the short term, you need it in the long term. All right. Okay. Next asset class, private credit, alternative lending. So it's kind of a fancy way, private credit, right? Sounds fancy. I'll tell you what it is. It's the exact same thing your Uncle Lenny did back in the day. He was the guy that always was kind of had a deal for somebody. Somebody goes, hey, Lenny, I need 10 grand. He goes, hey, no problem. You're good for it. In fact, why don't you give me 11 grand back? I'm making him sound a little bit like a loan shark. I don't know why, but why don't you give me 11 grand back in a year? Anytime. You don't have to make payments. Just give me 11 grand back. And then the guy gets his 10 grand and then 1,000 above it. And Uncle Lenny made a 10% return, right? That's alternative lending. Okay. He didn't go to nobody went to the bank to get that loan. And so your money, okay, you can hand over to a professional underwriting portfolio management team that doles it out to what they deem to be good credit risks, whether it's a business or an individual. And it is done professionally and it is done in a very diversified fashion. But the most important part is everybody has won so far in this particular asset class. And there's really no reason to believe that things would change in the near future. Having said that, if you think about where people typically get loans, it's the bank. So the bank's making money. But if you're the lender, right, if you give them the money, you make the money. So the risk here, of course, is that the money is not given back to you. I probably should put this page up so you can see a little more on it, but that somehow it's not going to be received back, that, you know, the person will renege and not give you the money. And the contingency plan for that is in place. There's a lot of different things that alternative lenders and private credit strategies do to make sure that that is a risk that's mitigated to the best of their abilities. So the returns on these have historically been somewhere between what stocks and bonds do, right? So they've done a little bit better than the bonds and a little bit less than stocks. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can invest in this asset class, but it's an excellent complement. Again, if you're a client, you probably have already done this with me, or we've talking about it very recently. But if you're not a client, again, talk to either educate yourself on it or talk to your financial advisor about it. Okay, last topic here, and this is pretty simple, and that's that if you are in a position of having a lot of risk in one area, like let's just say you own a ton of stock in Apple, right, or Tesla, those two or Amazon, and those three really are the most common I hear about in terms of big concentrated positions these days. Maybe you can't sell it because you think you're gonna have to pay too much in capital gains. Or maybe you can't sell it because you can't part with it because you feel attached to it emotionally, sentimentally. And I still give you the don't be emotional talk and you go, yeah, well, I still want it. Okay, so here's what you do. You can, and I would absolutely hire a professional. You should not do this yourself, okay? But you can hedge it. There are things you can do. You can own the investment that you have. You can own that risk and then add things to the portfolio that help offset the risk. It's a little more of an advanced strategy, okay? That hedge helps give you a bit of a pillow. So again, let's say you own the stock you know, that you've fallen in love with, and that thing ends up going down 40%. Okay, well, maybe you're still up. Maybe you've lost a lot of what you've gained, but you're still up and you still feel good about it. But if you put a hedged equity position in your portfolio, then potentially losing 40% is not what you're going to lose. Maybe you lose only half of that. And you're like, Jeff, you're saying losing 20% is a good thing? What I'm saying is this: no matter what you stand to lose, if you hedge that, you might potentially make out at the end with a little bit less of a loss, and therefore a little bit of a head start when things turn around again. Okay. You also should realize you're going to give up some upside, right? Because when you don't hedge, you have unlimited upside, but there's a cost to doing this. So, you know, it's going to come out of your pocket. And then finally, this idea that you can, it's not insurance, but it has a similar principle in that you can transfer the risk to something else, right? That's why it's advanced. And it uses the options market and all these other things. So professionals do all the time. Every one of my clients have hedges in their portfolio in one way or another. And so this is one of these things that if you haven't looked into it, again, look into it. Okay. Hedged equity, talk to your advisor, talk to me about it. So what's the goal here, guys? What is the goal? Is the goal to focus on these charts, the red, the green, the numbers, right? To pull your phone up and to constantly be, oh, look, I'm up, I'm down. Oh, wow, I'm up again, right? That is not information and news that's helpful for you. If anything, it induces more anxiety. So this is not the goal. So I hope a lot of the things that we've spoken about here today and that I've mentioned can help you get away from this habit. It's a lot more common than you might realize if you don't do it yourself. So get away from all this. That's not the goal. What's the goal? This is the goal. This is my goal. The goal to at least, I love the beach. I love water. I love relaxing. I kind of like these chairs. These chairs are pretty cool. No, this is not a picture of me and my wife, but yes, this is what I look forward to. It's not worrying about things, right? The world is going to go on no matter what. And the more we focus on the negatives of the world, you can tell this talk isn't just a financial one, right? The more we're going to feel negative about the world and the way our emotions are going to make us, I think, have decisions we might regret. And whether that's selling out of the stock market or just deciding to no longer contribute to your 401k because times are bad right now, right? All these things can really negatively affect you. So this is the goal. And none of this has to do with the stock market or the economy. Okay. It has to do with disciplined, small baby steps of financial success over a long period of time. And then one day, maybe this is something you can have, or insert your vision of your goal. All right. So guys, that wraps the content. It's now time for a little Q&A. I'm going to look at the chat box here and the Q&A panel. Let's see here. I'll go back. Okay, Q&A. So yeah, in the chat box, if you're interested, there are, again, you can send a message to the host and the panelists, or you can pull it down and just talk to me. And so if that's what you want to do, you can type the question in there. There's some other questions on the Q&A side that you can't see. And so one of these questions is a good one, I think, and that's about retirement. And it's being asked in two ways, but it's, if I'm looking to retire in the near future, is that a good idea, right? And I think the other way that it's being asked is I'm putting the words in potentially your mouth if you're somebody who's just retired, but that's, wow, did I make a mistake for retiring? Is this, was it a bad idea to retire in, let's say, December of 21 and go through what we're going through right now? Well, I can tell you this much. I do not know what it takes for you to live if you're looking to retire. The number one thing you should be most concerned about is not the economic news. No, the number one thing you should be most concerned about is how much money it takes for you to live from the 1st to the 30th of every single month, right? What's that lifestyle cost you to live a month in your shoes? And it's okay. I'm not asking you to come up with, a budget of sorts, because it's not about budgeting. It's really about awareness. So if it takes you, let's say, $5 grand a month to live, great. That's step number one. What if it takes you 12 grand? Well, that's fine. As long as you know the number, then the next step is looking at, have you saved enough, and do you have an ability to turn this amount of savings into an income stream? So again, that's where a professional financial advisor can come in. Maybe you can do it yourself, but none of it has to do with the stock market's, projection over the next 6 months or 12 months. Right? Because if you're 65 and retiring in the near future, again, you're probably going to live another 20 years, maybe 30 years. I've got clients in their late 60s. I got clients in their early 70s that have parents alive, right? Whether you think you want to live to age 90 or not, you might. So you kind of need to plan for that. So it's not about what's happening today. It's about what's going to happen in the long term. And not having enough to retire is a concern, but it's not the stock market that should be the number one concern. So how much you need to live on is the number one question. And if you have that answer, then the math can be done. The next thing, the next question, I always got looking over here at the chat box. Question is, what should or can you do to counter inflation? So inflation is a real concern, and it's sneaky, right? It's a little bit like the shark when you're a kid in the ocean and you're running out of the water and you've convinced yourself the shark's going to get you, right? And as much as you move those legs, boy, that water just doesn't give. And you feel like it's always going to get you, right? It's kind of sneaky. You don't always see it, right? But you feel like it's there. And it is. It's all over the news. I mean, right now it's up 8% year over year. And I just heard on the radio that the July 4th barbecue is going to cost 17% more this year than it did last year, right? So what do we do about that? Well, there are things you can do. One is, in the portfolio that you have, you should be investing in some things that are going to hopefully adjust how much they pay if they pay a fixed rate. I'll give you an example. Dividends from stocks can be adjusted, right? So make sure you own some stocks. If you're somebody who's very conservative and you don't own many stocks, but you do have a lot of fixed income type securities, you're going to be affected more than anybody else. So a portfolio that allows for you to have components that can have income rising along with inflation is the primary first defense. So inflation protected bonds, right? Treasury inflation protected bonds, adjustable rate bonds that can adjust to a higher inflation rate. All of these things. By the way, remember when adjustable rate mortgages caused a huge component of risk in the great financial crisis? Well, that's because you were getting the adjustment, right? You as the consumer, the person that took the loan out, were paying very little to begin with, and then it got adjusted upward and we're paying a lot. So who won on that one? Well, it certainly wasn't you. But if you're the person that owns the asset, owns the investment, you want to make sure that those rates have an adjustable component to them so that you can survive, right? So that as things go higher in the inflationary environment, that is also something that you would benefit from. So those are the top two primarily. And I know I see who's asking the question. So yes, give me a call and give you more specifics. But the other thing that I did talk about in the webinar is real estate. So that's something that would be also, I think, a good conversation for many of you. You don't have it in your portfolio. It's not as liquid as stocks. So if you like having access to your money at all times, at a moment's notice, maybe real estate isn't right for you, but for a certain portion of the portfolio, real estate can be a very good inflation hedge and give you growth and income over a long period of time. Other questions? I want to take a few more here. I did have a question I saw pop up on my little question box about, is it true we're in a recession? So this is what's crazy about recessions, is that it really doesn't matter if we're in one or not, because it's a little bit like blood pressure. Okay, it can be high, it can be low. There's an average, but it will change. And like I said earlier, to do something about it when it's happening can cause you sometimes more harm than good. And so if we're in one or not sure. It does seem like we're sort of heading in that direction. From being honest, there's just a lot of news stories and whatnot that you hear about where things are, the supply chain is broken in so many places, and somehow every worker that's available can't find work, but every place you go says we don't have enough staff. There's a mismatch. Something's going on. Inflation's high. There's a lot of things, right? So is that a negative? Are these all scary topics to completely bury ourselves and worry about? No, they're happening. But again, it's more of a topic of cocktail party fodder, right? Are we in a recession? I don't know. Let me tell you my experience. I run a business and this is what's going on. And so, yeah, it really doesn't matter if we're in one. I don't know. The only way you can know is actually, frankly, let time go by. Then you look back and you go, aha, we had 2 quarters of negative economic contraction. And ta-da, that's the definition of a recession. So we may get there soon. But whether we do or we don't, it really doesn't matter, frankly. So I've got just a few more minutes here. And I just want to make sure that if you're interested, you want to learn more about what we're doing, go to our website, sierraocean.com. You can call me. It's 209-232-7100. You can even email me, jeff@sierraocean.com. Office is in Ripon, California, and I'm extremely happy to have it in the very small town in which I live. But I have clients all around the United States. And so to that extent, this type of technology, Zoom, allows for me to connect with a lot of people. So no matter where you are, if you want to get in touch, feel free, and I'd be happy to look at what you're doing. We are going to have, as people say, what's the market going to do tomorrow? And I always say, it's going to move. We're definitely going to have a lot of volatility, a lot of movement. So hang on. If you're not sure if you're doing the right thing with your money, if you want a reevaluation of how you're investing, here's one. If you've got cash on the sidelines, I did the webinar earlier today, and one of the questions was, what should I do if I have cash on the sidelines and I want to invest? Is now a good time? Well, you know what I'm going to say. Now's always a good time. But the entry, how do you invest it so you don't feel like you're just doing the whole hog and then what, right? Because what if you do the whole thing and the next thing the market goes down, you're going to feel really bad about that. With enough time, it'll cure itself. Yes, we all know that logically, but emotionally, here's kind of the best thing to do. If you're committed to doing the right thing with your money and you would like to invest it, come up with a plan as to how it should look once it's fully invested, and then come up with a timing of how long it would take for you to get into that position. And you do what's known as dollar cost averaging. So if you have a retirement plan, like a 401k, where your paycheck has some money coming out of it every single time you get paid, you do that already. You're dollar cost averaging at all times, ups and downs, ups and downs. You are going to get an average price that's decent. You can do the same thing right now. You can put, let's say you've got 100 grand, you can put a third of it, $33,000 or $7,000 into it. Let's say in the next 30 days. In 6 months, you can do another 3,000 or so, and then you can put the balance in 6 months after that, right? You can do it every 3 or 4 months. Come up with a time frame. What matters is that you put the money to work, and it's in a plan that works for your needs and objectives. How you get in is really whatever you're most comfortable doing. And I can't tell you if you put it all in today, it's a good time to do it. I don't know if tomorrow is your evaluation point. So if you do it over a longer time period, you almost always are going to feel better about that. unless it goes straight up from here, and then you're going to wish you would have put it all in. But the woulda, shoulda, coulda club, come on, right? We're all members of it. Problem is I don't have a time machine. We can't fix it from that perspective. So, all right, guys, any more questions? Let me take a look over here. Q&A, don't see any there. Okay, if you registered, you will get a copy of the webinar. We'll send this out to you in the next couple of days. And I appreciate everybody for coming. Thanks so much. Have a great day.